my relationship with a 16-year older woman when I was 28 and what I learned from it. First of all, I'm sorry for my English, as I'm not a native speaker, so any expressions that seem of may be due to my lack of vocabulary, as well as spelling errors. I wrote, on my other post, the story of something that happened to a friend of mine. And now it's time to tell you all my personal story. For you all to understand my reactions, I have to go way back. I was a late baby. My mother was 39 and my father 40 when I was born. Soon after, my father was diagnosed with a professional disease, silicosis. When I was about 4, he had to stop working, and I spent my childhood watching my father going from a giant of a man to a mere shadow of himself. At 12, I had my father laying in cardiac arrest, in my arms, while I pounded his chest to keep him breathing until medical help arrived. He ended up dying from the disease when I was 20, but all my life was spent seeing the person I loved the most in this world decaying until his death. Add to this the fact that we lived in a very isolated area, and I basically grew up almost alone in a house filled with books. I read stuff like Chariots of the Gods when I was 8, and by 10 I was reading stuff like War and Peace and rationalizing my feelings every single day. So, it's fair to say that this probably shaped my personality and gave me a strong sense that nothing in life is permanent. I'm not ashamed to say that, even though my dad's passing was one of the most painful moments in my life, it also came with a sense of relief. His suffering stopped. I always looked older than I was, ironically. Nowadays it's quite the opposite. I look way younger than I am or feel, so I had a lot of hookups, usually with girls that were a bit older than me, but I never really wanted a girlfriend or any other sort of relationship, other than friendships. But, not long after my dad's passing, I started dating a wonderful girl. We are still friends to this day. The first 2 years of our relationship were awesome, but she went to study in a city about 200 miles away, and we entered a phase where we would only see each other every 2 weeks. She ended up isolating herself in there, and by the end of her course she had a chronic depression. She didn't acknowledge it and refused treatment, and, even though she was back permanently, our relation was never healthy anymore, became more of a codependency, with me and her family trying everything to no avail and her condition getting worse and worse. To top it, I lost my job for health-related issues. I ended up falling into a depression myself. My self-esteem, that was not very high, plummeted even more. I gained about 50 pounds and generally looked like a homeless person. I felt trapped and afraid of what she would do if I ended it with her. But one day, I still don't know why, something clicked deep inside of me. I ended things with her, and that prompted her to seek medical treatment, finally, and life moved on for both of us. So, at this time I found a new job, was trying to find myself again, and was not looking for anything in the relationship department, as I felt I was damaged goods. Enter H. H was a stunning, sophisticated woman that worked in the same department as I did. She was divorced but living together with a very wealthy and successful guy. She was always talking about the jet-set parties she attended, not to gloat, but because all the other colleagues all women, I was the only male in that floor, always wanted to know. And she was beautiful and completely out of my league, a 28 years old overweight headbanger, playing others' music at bars on the weekends just to get a bit more income. We became unlikely friends. I was the only guy who really knew about computers, and she asked me if I would help her and her husband to create a logo for a new business they were trying to launch. I agreed to do it, and we started to spend some time together, even going to her house to fix internet problems and other problems in their personal PC. As we worked in the same place, we would often have lunch together, and our friendship grew. And I started to become more and more attracted to her and began to notice that she was feeling the same. But I didn't even want to entertain that notion. She was with someone, I had known the guy. But the feeling was there. She had 2 daughters. The elder lived with her father, so I never really saw her that much, but her youngest lived with her, was an early teen at the time, and she really took a liking of me. Maybe because I treated her more as a grown-up than a kid. My friendship with H continued to grow, and, about 6 months into all of this, she started confiding in me. Even though on the surface everything seemed perfect in her relationship, right below things were not that good. I listened to a lot of things that, quite frankly, repulsed me, but, even though I was there, I made a conscious effort not to offer any advice, as I didn't think it was my place to do so. I offered a shoulder and a ear where she could vent her frustrations, but I never encouraged her or offer advice. Especially because, every single time our eyes locked, it was like electricity was passing from one to the other. I could feel the S-time tension between us ramping up, but I kept telling myself there was no way a woman like her would even entertain the notion of being a guy like me, so it was all in my head, and I slowly started to pull away from her. Even if she had feelings for me, she was with somebody and I was not going to be that guy. And it was at this time that things in their relation really started to turn really bad. Ange started looking for a place she could afford and separated from him. She asked for my help moving, which I gladly did, and 1 week later, after she had put the house in order, she invited me for dinner, and I ended up spending the night. 2 weeks after that, and after some really long talks, we decided we wanted to have a relationship. We told her daughter, who was ecstatic with the news. Everything seemed to be going well. For the first time in my life, I wasn't feeling just some fleeting moments of happiness. I was happy, and this was a new feeling for me. But my feelings that nothing is permanent were still there. So was my way of rationalizing everything around me. And both those feelings told me that odds were this would not last, especially due to our age difference. I was 28 and she was 44. We started to look for a place to live as a family, as the place where she moved in was just 1 bedroom, 1 living room, and a tiny kitchen, and even tinier dubsy. The relationship was evolving, everything seemed good, but I started to notice how she tried to influence me to change. Some things, like the way I dressed, the fact that I needed to lose some weight, I felt were totally normal, and even welcomed. But in other stuff, it seemed like she was trying to rebuild me to her standards, not accepting me for who I was. 6 months in and we had a vacation together. We decided to just get in the car, go and spend the night wherever we were. But in the first night we headed to another city where she had a girlfriend. We ended up meeting the friend and spending the night at her house, as she didn't let us go to an hotel. Nothing happened here, but this friend will be important later. We will call her E. She worked 2 jobs, as a secretary during the day, as waitress in a bar at night, and was also a volunteer firefighter. She was a tough woman. But all the time we spent with her, she was complaining how hard it was to find a man. Mind you, this friend was my girlfriend's age, so mid-40s. We left that city and spent the following week roaming around, having fun, and on the last night, before we returned to her place, after a long and very torrid night of S-time, while we were smoking in the balcony of the hotel room we were at, she asked me, where do you think this relationship is heading? And all the old stuff I had inside just surfaced. We ended up having a good talk, but, from that moment on, I knew something was quite not right. She turned in after we talked and I ended up spending the night sitting on a chair in that balcony, just watching the scenery, smoking and thinking. I knew she loved me, I loved her, but the differences between us, the difference between what I was and what she wished I was surfacing. The next day we were back at her place and the world seemed to realign again. It was a really awesome day. The next day her younger came back from her father and he came with her daughter to spend a week at her house. I was just going to Sadie that night and then going home and return to work. As soon as E arrived, she asked where the fire station was. She said it was customary for volunteer firefighters, when in another town, go to the fire station and leave their contact in case anything was needed. She went into the firehouse and came back having met one of the guys in there, with his phone number and an invitation to go to a dance club at night. We all decided to go, even though it's not really the kind of place I enjoyed. At night, the firefighter arrived with another guy in tow. I found it really odd, and wanted to back out on the spot, but eventually went along because her daughter really begged me to go. So we went. The dance club had an open space in the back, with a swimming pool and a wonderful view of the ocean, and that is where I spent the night with her daughter, just talking and laughing. At some point she turned to me and asked, "You really do love my mother, don't you?" And I just smiled and said yes. She just hugged me and said good. Her mother, E, and the tow firefighters were at the dance floor all the time. After about 2 hours of me being bored, I went to check on them and saw them. And the dancing was really provocative. Let's just say I didn't like what I saw. When we finally left the club, we walked to her home. E was talking with the original guy she had met, H was talking to the other guy that came along and I was in the back, talking to her daughter. That's when the guy that was talking to H asked her, discreetly, but not enough for me not to notice, what was the deal with me, and her answer was, oh, he is just a good friend. We got to her house, the guys left, we all went to bed. She slept with me in the living room, but there was no time that night. The following morning, I left. Now, we used to talk on the phone every day, and text messages were a constant between us. On that day, in the evening, I tried to call, but no answer, no call back. The next day, same thing. Throughout the week, she either wouldn't pick up and said she couldn't talk and would call me later, or her daughter would pick up and say her mother was already asleep. And I understood. So, after a week, I simply stopped calling. As hard as it was, I knew that there was no point in pursuing a relationship with someone that obviously was, at the least, having doubts about being with me. And I was deeply sad, but, somehow, all my life seemed to have prepared me for stuff like this. I just completely detached, put all those feelings in a drawer, closed it, and thought to myself that everything is what has to be. I couldn't prevent the sadness I felt, but I could really control the anger and not let it dominate me. The thought of losing her tormented me, but my rational side would kick in and say, how can you lose something that was never yours? Because the fact is that no one belongs to anyone. And trying to force someone to be with you is a bad recipe. All you end up with is bitterness, sadness, depression and resentfulness. I had given up my cover band, as I was thinking of moving, but got in touch with my guys again. The band was re-established with a new name and lineup, and we started making a playlist and booking shows and rehearsing. And then, 1 month after the last time we had seen each other, after 3 weeks of absolutely no contact, she called. It was a Friday and she was asking me if I wanted to come by her house and have dinner with her. She said she was alone, as her daughter went back to her father to spend a few more days. I told her I was busy that day and she was taken aback, but the invitation stood for the next day, even though I told her I wouldn't be there for dinner, but we could grab a drink afterwards. So, I arrived at her place on that Saturday at about 9:30 p.m. She came to the door wearing almost nothing. We hugged, and when she went for a kiss, I just turned my face, giving her my cheek. She was really shaken after this. I waited in her living room as she got dressed, and we went out to a bar at walking distance from her house, where we had never been together. On the way there she asked if I liked the dress she was wearing, and I complimented her. She said she knew I always liked seeing her in that dress, and that was why she was wearing it. I said nothing about it. We arrived at the bar, sat down, a guy came to collect our orders, and they were treating each other on first name basis. Then I started looking around and I seemed to be the center of attentions. There must be something wrong with me today. I told her. Why? Well, everybody seems to be looking at me. Don't mind that. She just said. But the fact was that everybody there seemed to know her, especially the men in there, and I knew very well what they were thinking by the way they looked at her. It was about 11 p.m. when we got back at her door. Do you want to come up? She asked. No, I'll just get going. I would really like you to come up. I believe you, but that's not going to happen. Why? Well, because you made your choices and forced me to do mine. What do you mean? Well, did you have fun with the firefighter? Apparently he wasn't the lay you thought he would be, or maybe he was, but you were just a toy. What are you talking about? The guy you slept with. I didn't sleep with him. I just laughed. You don't have to lie to me, I'm just a good friend, remember? She went pale. You told him that, so why wouldn't he persuade you? And you had to eat here for another week, a week you didn't even answer the phone. Were you that guilty? Or you just didn't want to spoil your and fun? She just started crying. Don't be like that. I'm not mad at you. To tell you the truth, I'm grateful. Grateful for what you have given me, for the time we had, for building something in me that was never really there, my self-esteem. But the moment you said that, I knew you wanted to duck him and I was just in the way. And I'm not even going to talk about the bar where we were at. How many hookups did you have with guys from there? Did you get it out of your system and now wanted something more steady? Well, I'm not your boyfriend. I guess I never really was. I was just an eluded FWB. And I know I'm not the last bottle of water in the desert, that physically I can't compare to them, but even so there must be something in me that made you call me back after a month. So, maybe I'm not all that bad. But we are done. He'll always be your friend, he'll always love you, and if you ever need anything, I'm a phone call away, but other than that, we are done. I gave her a hug and a kiss on the cheek, watched her getting into the building, sobbing, got my car keys and headed off. About an hour later, as I was arriving home, she called me. I pulled to the side of the road to take the call, and as soon as I picked up I just could hear her crying and screaming, I'm sorry, please come back, I love you, I don't want to lose you. And there, right there, it was like all the pain erupted at once. It was like someone was ripping me apart, like my brain finally subsided and my emotions took free rein of me. I completely lost control. Say something, please, was all she could say for a couple of minutes, while I collected myself in silence, even though I was feeling like my world was collapsing. You never loved me. You loved the idea of what you thought you could make of me. But I'm not really the person you wanted, so now you are free to find someone more in line with what you want. I love you and would give my life for you, but I will not tolerate betrayal and disrespect. I'm not a kid you can wrap around your finger. I don't exist just to tend to your needs and wants. We are through, we are over, and there is no coming back from this. And then I just cut the call. Before I really broke apart, got out of the car, screamed. The cell phone rang again, and it was her again, so I just smashed it on the floor. Then got back in the car, collected myself for some time, and finally drove home for a sleepless night. 5 months later, an angel walked into my life, and we've been together for the last 20 years, married for 15 with a beautiful daughter that is the light of my eyes. Never stopped being her friend until her untimely death, 10 years ago, due to a brain tumor. She never stopped professing her love for me, and the last time we spoke she just told me I was her greatest regret. I told her I regretted anything and was thankful for what we had. Her daughter still loves me to this day. So, not being a spectacular story, why tell it? I see many people here trying their best to hang on to an illusion. I see many people talking in terms of alpha and beta males. Well, I'm not an alpha, as I don't impose myself on anyone, and not a beta, as I don't bow down to anyone. So I really don't know what I am, or if to reach some stupid categorization for me. All I can say is that if you love somebody, you have to set them free, as Sting would say. And then their actions will tell you if they want to be with you or not. Because if they say they do, but their actions don't show you the respect you deserve, you are just in for pain and misery or blissful ignorance. Forcing someone to be by your side is counterproductive and only leads to resentment. That is why so many people talk about the 180. Sometimes you only know what you lost when it's gone. And, so many times, you get in that 180 mentality and you start to really look coldly at things. Did you really want that person in your life? Or is it just your pride for losing something that was never really yours to begin with? Peace.